immigration or being new to the country, we identified an awful lot of things that add into isolation and loneliness. We also recognise that there's a distinction between the two, maybe more so in this than in some of the others. So obviously language barriers we felt was a very big factor, as well as losing your identity, so not necessarily feeling you entirely belong here, but also not necessarily entirely belonging where you once were. We also recognise that poverty played a big role in that as well if you're new to the country. When we looked at what we had already, we recognised that we had a huge amount in place already in terms of some quite large organisations and opportunities, but also in some very much smaller, more specific groups that are out there. We saw that our faith groups are tackling some issues, but again, much like Emma's ageing table said, we could maybe do more to get groups working together better. We also recognise that in Slough we're maybe not as good as we should be about shouting about what we already have. So we have all these groups that are out there that exist, that people know about, some people know about, but not everybody knows about. So we're maybe not able to connect people with groups when we need to. And so one of the things that we felt we should do is shout more about what we have, give it some more publicity, look at our online information and whether that's as accessible as it could be. Is our online information in other languages as well as English? And come May, we're going to take the new mayor absolutely everywhere so they know where it's at.
Hi, so we looked at carers. One of the things that we identified for carers is that nobody's actually trained to be a carer, and it can happen very, very suddenly. You can find that you've lost your identity, you've been the child and your parents have always looked after you, and suddenly you've become the parent looking after your parent who is now in need of your support. So that very quick loss of identity, that loss of identity can also include loss of employment. You've been working and suddenly you now need to give up work or take part-time work or different work to encompass your caring responsibilities. So that loss of identity can be very difficult for people. That loss of identity can also come with a loss of income. You've been working full-time, you've been bringing in full-time money, suddenly you've lost access to your salary and are now reliant on benefits to look after both yourself and you're cared for. We talked about the amount of time it can take. So I had a friend who was trying to find out some information about a hospital appointment for her mum. It took her 7 hours to get an answer about this hospital appointment. It took all day. If you were trying to work and care for someone, it can become almost impossible. We talked about transport, that actually it can be very difficult to get around Slough, even if you're very able-bodied. But if you're trying to get around Slough to appointments with your cared for who may have mobility or mental health problems, actually that can be very difficult and very challenging. So we looked at who is providing caring support within the community. There's obviously Slough Carers Support. We looked at Sydenham carers, Special Voices, Asian carers, Meet and Mingle, who at the moment have kind of more restricted activities, but hopefully they will be starting up some carer support again soon. We looked at, talked about GP surgeries, hospices, Macmillans, and looked at some of the groups that are out there. But most of our activities will in some way be touched by carers. There are carers out there. And actually one of the things we identified is that carers don't always recognise that they're carers. And one of the things that perhaps we can do individually and also professionally is help them identify that they are carers and there is support available. So we looked at some of the complications. So we talked about recognising carers and for carers to recognise they are carers. And we talked a little bit about the stigma. For some reason, and I don't really understand why, there is a bit of a stigma in identifying yourself as a carer. And particularly if you're a young carer, you don't want to be seen as different to all of your peers. So you don't necessarily identify with the word carer. We talked about kind of that emotional adjustment that you need to you have when you suddenly find that you're now a carer. So we looked at what else could be done, and we identified that actually these issues aren't just Slough issues, these are national issues. But what we can do is try individually and in our groups is raise more awareness around recognising carers and making sure that carers are aware that there is support available. So we talked about perhaps doing a campaign, some adverts. There's some work going on around recording the stories of carers and perhaps putting some learning in to support carers. We talked about perhaps more training for professionals and more training for volunteers, again to recognise that people are carers or unpaid carers and to provide support to those people. And we talked a little bit about Slough CBS's initiative around Live Well Champions, who will be volunteers who are going out into the community and hopefully identifying and working with carers. Has anyone else got anything to add? And I will shut up.